Have you ever wondered if the 6,000 years of biblical prophecy are coming to an end? What if what many consider distant could be fulfilled much sooner than we think, even next month? In this video, we will explore the signs, calculations, and current events that could indicate that the 6,000-year cycle is about to conclude, revealing surprising connections between history, prophecy, and our present reality. Get ready to discover information that may change the way you see the end times. Have you ever wondered how God counts the 6,000 years of human history, and what it really means that this cycle may be coming to an end? The prophecy of the 6,000 years is one of the most fascinating and mysterious concepts in the Bible, and understanding its historical and spiritual context is key to correctly interpreting the times in which we live. According to this prophecy, humanity has a period of 6,000 years from creation to a point of culmination that marks the beginning of a new cycle, a decisive moment in divine history. The calculation of the 6,000 years is based on biblical chronology, beginning with Adam, considered the first man according to Scripture. The genealogies and records found in books like Genesis allow us to establish an approximate timeline from creation to later historical events. These calculations have been used for centuries by Bible scholars to estimate prophetic times and to understand when God's promises and warnings might be fulfilled. Historically, many have tried to correlate biblical years with the current calendar, taking into account reigns, exiles, prophecies, and significant events in Israel and other nations mentioned in the Bible. Each period, each reign, and each event form part of a pattern that reflects God's intervention in history and His plan for humanity. This interpretation helps us understand that prophecy is not just an abstract concept, but a framework that connects the spiritual with the historical, allowing us to see history in the light of God's will. The importance of the 6,000 years is also connected with the idea that each millennium represents a stage of testing and development for humanity. During these 6 millennia, humanity has faced temptations, wars, injustices, and spiritual advances that reflect both the fall and the possibility of redemption. The prophecy indicates that at the end of this period, a significant change will occur, which, according to many scholars, coincides with the beginning of the kingdom of God, or a time of direct intervention in human affairs. Understanding the biblical context of the 6,000 years allows us to better interpret current events and the signs we are observing. It helps us see history as a pattern guided by God, where every century, every event, and every change in humanity has a purpose within the divine plan. Prophecy is not meant to generate fear, but to call us to reflection, preparation, and spiritual vigilance, reminding us that we are living in a critical period that requires attention to faith, obedience, and awareness of the times. In conclusion, the historical and biblical context of the 6,000 years combines genealogy, chronology, historical events, and spiritual teachings. It shows us that human history is not random, but part of a divine design that points to a culminating moment. Understanding this framework allows us to observe current signs with discernment and to prepare for the end times with faith, vigilance, and hope. Have you ever wondered if we are truly about to see the fulfillment of the 6,000-year cycle? And how biblical calculations could point to the fact that the end of this period is very near, even next month? Understanding the calculations and chronologies surrounding this prophecy is not just an academic exercise, but a way to connect history, prophecy, and current events in order to interpret the end times according to the Bible. The first step in understanding the prophecy of the 6,000 years is to identify the starting point, the creation of Adam. The Bible provides detailed genealogies in the book of Genesis, listing the lifespans of each patriarch and establishing a timeline that allows us to trace the line from Adam to later significant events. These records are not just names and ages, but indicators of periods and stages that reflect God's intervention in human history and His plan for humanity. Each generation has a purpose within this pattern, setting the stage for the fulfillment of divine promises and prophetic warnings. Historically, many scholars have correlated these biblical years with our modern calendar. For example, they analyze the reigns of the kings of Israel and Judah, the exiles, divine judgments, and times of spiritual restoration, seeking to establish a coherent chronological framework. Some calculations suggest that each millennium represents a period of testing, learning, and preparation, and that the completion of the 6,000 years marks a monumental shift in human history, a moment when God's intervention will be more direct and evident. Furthermore, the Bible and experts in eschatology point out that certain historical events serve symbolic roles within this cycle. Wars, the displacement of peoples, spiritual revelations, and cultural changes are not merely isolated incidents, but signs that integrate into a greater pattern. History becomes a narrative with a divine purpose, where each event contributes to preparing humanity for the end of the 6,000-year cycle. This perspective allows us to analyze the present with a prophetic outlook and to recognize patterns that may indicate the nearness of fulfillment. One of the most debated calculations is the estimation of the exact years from the creation of Adam to the present. Different methods consider the biblical genealogies, the lifespans of the patriarchs, the reigns of kings, and the periods of prophets and exiles. Although there are variations, many agree that we are very close to completing the 6,000 years, which has led to speculation about the proximity of a significant change in world and spiritual history. Some studies even suggest that next month could mark the end of the cycle based on the sum of these periods and their alignment with current signs in society and in Israel. The calculations also take into account the relationship between the 6,000 years and the prophetic Sabbath rest, which the Bible mentions as a 1,000-year period of peace and justice. Each millennium represents a cycle of work, testing, and preparation, similar to the weekly rest, and the 6,000 years would be the total time of humanity's preparation before divine intervention. Understanding this perspective both symbolically and literally helps us interpret current events and the signs that could indicate we are reaching the end of the cycle. The signs accompanying these calculations include political and social changes, conflicts in Israel and other key regions, moral and spiritual decline, and technological advances that affect the way we live and relate. The Bible suggests these events are not random, but part of a pattern that prepares humanity for the end of a cycle and the beginning of a new era in the divine plan. Observing these signs together with biblical and historical calculations allows us to anticipate and discern the end times with greater clarity, Spiritual preparation is another crucial aspect related to the calculations of the 6,000 years. Recognizing that the cycle could be near its end is not meant to instill fear, but to encourage vigilance, faith, and obedience. Believers are called to strengthen their relationship with God, maintain constant prayer, and act with discernment in the face of the world's changes. Prophecy not only points to dates or cycles, but also emphasizes the need to be spiritually prepared for the end times. Finally, it is important to remember that calculations and chronologies are not absolute exactitudes, but guides to interpret events and discern signs. However, when combined with observation of current events, they allow us to identify clear patterns that reflect the fulfillment of prophecy. History, biblical chronology, and present-day events intertwine to show that we are in a critical period and that the 6,000 years could be concluding very soon. In conclusion, the calculations and chronologies of the 6,000-year prophecy present us with a historical and spiritual framework that connects the creation of Adam with current times. Analyzing genealogies, reigns, exiles, sabbatical cycles, and historical events allows us to understand how the divine plan unfolds and how today's signs may indicate we are close to the end of the cycle. Being attentive to these signs allows us to prepare, strengthen our faith, and live with discernment as we witness the fulfillment of prophecy in our generation. Here's the continuation and completion of your full English translation. Have you ever wondered what current signs might indicate that the 6,000 years of biblical prophecy are nearing their end, and that next month could mark a crucial moment in human history? Observing the signs does not mean living in fear, but learning to discern the patterns that the Bible predicts and understanding how they relate to the events we see in today's world. From geopolitical conflicts to spiritual and moral changes, these signs help us interpret the end times more clearly. One of the most obvious indicators is the situation in Israel and Jerusalem. Biblical prophecy highlights this region as central to the final events. Conflicts, disputes over holy sites, and political tensions are not isolated incidents, but signs that reflect what the Bible anticipates as critical events before the end of the 6,000-year cycle. Every decision by leaders, every armed conflict, and every diplomatic movement in this region must be observed carefully as they align with the prophetic pattern of divine intervention and judgment. Another important indicator is the increase in moral and spiritual decay among humanity. The Bible predicts that the last days will be marked by apostasy, corruption, and widespread immorality. Today, we see many societies accepting behaviors previously considered contrary to ethics and faith, questioning fundamental principles, and prioritizing human interests over divine values. This moral and spiritual deviation reflects the warnings of prophecy, showing that humanity is moving away from God's paths and approaching a period of testing and judgment. The manipulation of information and control of public opinion are also signs of the end times. The Bible anticipates that humanity will be guided and in many cases deceived by leaders and systems seeking to impose an order contrary to God's will. Today, the saturation of news, propaganda, and technological surveillance allows the perception of millions to be shaped, influencing decisions and normalizing behaviors contrary to divine principles. This control aligns with prophetic warnings about widespread manipulation and deception in the last days. Additionally, technological advances and globalization play a crucial role as signs of the end times. The Bible speaks of an interconnected world where humanity can be observed and controlled on a large scale. And today, technology allows precisely that. From artificial intelligence to mass digital tracking, these tools reflect the fulfillment of warnings about global control and oversight. Technology is not just a practical matter, it is also a spiritual indicator, because its use can bring humanity closer to prophetic fulfillment if it deviates from God's principles. Economic and social crises are another relevant indicator. Prophecy mentions times of scarcity, conflict, and widespread unrest, and today we observe phenomena that fit these predictions: inflation, social polarization, mass migrations, and extreme inequalities. These crises are not isolated events, but part of a pattern warning of a period of testing for humanity. Economic and social instability creates conditions for the prophesied systems and leaders to exert influence, preparing humanity for the approaching events. Religious and spiritual movements also reflect signs of the end times. The Bible warns of increased apostasy and spiritual confusion, where many will be misled by false teachers and doctrines that seem correct but stray from the truth. Today we see reinterpretations of faith, ecumenical movements, and doctrines adapted to human interests, which aligns with prophecy anticipating a time of spiritual deviation. True faith will be tested, and recognizing these signs is essential for remaining steadfast and vigilant. Finally, it is important to consider the interconnectedness of all these signs. None occur in isolation. Together they form a coherent pattern that reflects the culmination of the 6,000 years. Conflicts in Israel, moral decay, media manipulation, technological advances, global crises, and spiritual apostasy combine to create a scenario that coincides with prophetic warnings. Observing these signs allows us to discern the times, understand the magnitude of events, and prepare spiritually for the changes that could mark the beginning of a new cycle according to prophecy. In conclusion, current signs include geopolitical conflicts, moral and spiritual decay, information manipulation, technological advances, economic crises, and religious movements. All of them form a pattern that aligns with the 6,000-year prophecy and suggests we are approaching a critical period. Recognizing these signs allows us to interpret events with discernment, strengthen our faith, and prepare spiritually, understanding that we are living in decisive times that could mark the culmination of a historical cycle and the beginning of a new chapter in God's plan. Have you ever wondered what consequences the fulfillment of the 6,000-year cycle could have for humanity, and how these changes might manifest according to biblical prophecy? Understanding possible consequences is not just about theorizing future dates or events, but about observing the historical, spiritual, and social patterns described in the Bible, and how they could influence our personal lives, society, and humanity's relationship with God. Recognizing these implications allows us to prepare with discernment and faith. One immediate effect would be a radical shift in humanity's spiritual awareness. The Bible anticipates that the end times will bring a spiritual awakening for some and a turning away from God for others. Those who have remained faithful and vigilant will be strengthened, while those who have ignored divine principles will face challenges that test their faith. This contrast between obedience and disobedience, faith and apostasy, will reflect the importance of how each person has lived within the 6,000-year cycle and set the stage for divine intervention. Before continuing, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss more content like this. That way, you'll always stay updated on our upcoming videos. Now, let's continue. In social and political spheres, the fulfillment of the cycle could coincide with an increase in conflicts and tensions worldwide. The Bible predicts that the last days will be marked by wars, unrest, and power struggles affecting all nations. World leaders, political alliances, and territorial conflicts will reflect the struggle between forces seeking control and those following principles of justice and truth. These events are not merely political. They are part of a prophetic pattern where humanity faces critical decisions that will affect its spiritual and material destiny. The global economy could also be affected. Prophecy mentions times of scarcity, crises, and economic tribulation that prepare humanity for deeper changes. Today, we already see indicators such as inflation, growing inequality, and financial systems concentrating power in few hands. The fulfillment of the 6,000-year cycle could intensify these conditions, creating a scenario where reliance on human systems becomes evident, and the need to trust in God becomes indispensable. The economy, therefore, is not just a material indicator, but a test of humanity's spiritual preparedness. On a moral level, an increase in corruption, injustice, and ethical deviation is expected. The Bible warns that the last days will be a period where morality is tested, and many will follow paths contrary to the truth. This moral deterioration affects social coexistence and prepares the ground for divine intervention, highlighting the need for justice, obedience, and discernment. Humanity will face the consequences of its decisions, and deviation from divine principles will be evident to all. Another important effect relates to technology and globalization. The Bible mentions control over humanity and surveillance that will allow decisions and behaviors to be monitored on a massive scale. Today, technological advances allow millions of people to be monitored, influenced, and guided, which could become a key instrument during the end times. Technology, therefore, not only facilitates daily life, but also functions as a means to fulfill prophecy, showing how humanity can be directed toward paths that reflect the completion of the 6,000-year cycle. Spiritually, the fulfillment of the cycle emphasizes the need for personal preparation. The Bible indicates that those who remain vigilant, faithful, and obedient will be able to discern the times and face challenges without losing faith. Spiritual preparation includes constant prayer, scripture study, reflection on one's life, and strengthening the community of believers. This preparation not only protects the individual, but also serves as an example and guide for others, strengthening collective faith in the face of approaching prophetic events. The impact on humanity also includes a heightened awareness of life's fragility and the importance of individual and collective decisions. The end times, according to prophecy, will reveal the consequences of human actions on moral, social, and spiritual levels. This presents a unique opportunity to reflect on life, obedience to God, and personal responsibility in relation to history and the fulfillment of God's plan. Recognizing this dimension allows us to live more consciously, strengthen our faith, and act prudently in a world undergoing profound changes. Finally, The fulfillment of the 6,000-year cycle marks not only the end of a historical period, but also the beginning of a time of more direct divine intervention, a period of justice and the establishment of God's plans. Global, moral, spiritual, and social changes combine to prepare humanity for the culmination of this cycle, reminding us that every action, decision, and choice impacts our lives and collective history. Observing these signs and acting with discernment allows us to live with hope and preparation. In conclusion, the potential consequences of fulfilling the 6,000-year cycle encompass spiritual awareness, global conflicts, the economy, morality, technology, and personal preparation. Recognizing these implications allows us to interpret current events, strengthen faith, and prepare to face the end times with discernment, obedience, and hope, remembering that human history is guided by a divine plan unfolding according to prophecy. Have you ever wondered how we can prepare spiritually for the possible fulfillment of the 6,000-year cycle, and what it really means to be ready for the end times? Preparation is not only about observing external signs or historical calculations, but about strengthening faith, discerning events, and living according to the principles God has taught us. Spiritual preparation is key to facing a period that prophecy describes as decisive for humanity, a time when vigilance and fidelity will determine how each person experiences the coming changes. The first step in this preparation is spiritual vigilance. The Bible calls us to be alert, to keep our minds and hearts focused on God's will, and not to be deceived by false leaders or doctrines that distort the truth. This vigilance involves constant prayer, scripture study, and reflection on daily conduct. Observing the world with discernment allows us to recognize the signs of prophecy's fulfillment without succumbing to fear, keeping faith firm and clear. Obedience to divine principles is another essential component. The last days, according to the Bible, will be marked by apostasy and moral deviation. Remaining faithful to the values of justice, integrity, and love for others protects us against spiritual confusion and prepares us to face challenges without losing faith. Obedience not only strengthens our relationship with God, but also allows us to act as living testimony to His truth in a world moving away from His ways. Personal discipline also plays an important role. The end times will bring temptations, deceptions, and trials that challenge our faith. Maintaining life habits that strengthen mind, body, and spirit allows us to resist external pressures and act prudently. This includes controlling emotions, reflecting on important decisions, and living consistently with divine values. Discipline helps us remain steadfast, avoiding deviation during uncertain times. Strengthening the community of believers is equally vital. The Bible shows that believers will not face the challenges of the last days alone. Collective prayer, mutual support, and shared teaching are essential tools to stay firm and strong. Actively participating in a spiritual community helps discern truth, receive guidance, maintain faith, and serve as a guide for others who may feel confused or insecure in the face of current events. Discernment regarding external events is also part of spiritual preparation. Observing politics, the economy, international conflicts, and cultural changes through the lens of prophecy allows us to make informed decisions and act wisely. This discernment is not meant to instill fear, but understanding, helping us interpret the time correctly and respond in alignment with God's will. Finally, spiritual preparation requires active hope. The end times will be a period of testing, but prophecy assures us that God has a plan and that His justice will prevail. Maintaining hope enables us to face challenges without despair, trusting that vigilance, obedience, and faith will guide us through any trial. Hope acts as an anchor, keeping our faith steady even when the world seems chaotic or uncertain. In conclusion, preparing spiritually for the fulfillment of the 6,000-year cycle involves vigilance, obedience, discipline, community strengthening, discernment, and hope. These elements allow us to face the end times with faith and prudence, remaining steadfast in our relationship with God and serving as an example and guide for those around us. Preparation is not optional. It is essential to live fully aware of the times in which we find ourselves. Have you ever wondered how we can apply the prophecy of the 6,000 years to daily life, and what decisions we can make today to be ready for the end times? Understanding prophecy is not just about dates or historical calculations, but about how it influences our daily lives, faith, and relationship with God. Living with awareness of the end times means making conscious decisions that strengthen our spirituality, conduct, and ability to discern challenges in the modern world. The first practical step is strengthening our personal relationship with God. Prophecy reminds us that the end times will be a period of testing, and that spiritual vigilance is crucial. This involves dedicating time to prayer, meditating on the Word, and reflecting on how our actions and decisions align with divine principles. Maintaining a constant connection with God allows us to discern events and recognize signs that may indicate the fulfillment of prophecy, protecting us from deception and spiritual confusion. Another important element is daily ethics and conduct. The Bible predicts that morality will be tested in the last days, and practical preparation includes living according to values of justice, honesty, and compassion. This not only protects us from mistakes or harmful decisions, but also makes us visible examples to those around us. Consistency between belief and action strengthens faith and helps maintain resilience against external pressures that could lead us away from God's paths. Practical preparation also involves discernment regarding external influences. Prophecy warns about leaders, doctrines, and systems that will attempt to guide humanity down the wrong path. Observing politics, the economy, social movements, and cultural changes through a faith-based perspective allows informed decisions and avoidance of manipulative traps. Discernment is a key tool for navigating the end times, identifying what is true and what contradicts divine principles. Strengthening the spiritual community is another vital aspect of practical preparation. The Bible emphasizes that believers will not face the challenges of the last days alone. Active participation in a faith community, sharing teachings, praying together, and supporting one another provides strength, guidance, and clarity amid prophetic events. Spiritual cooperation helps maintain faith, protects against deception, and serves as an example for those seeking guidance in a time of widespread confusion. Managing personal resources and planning are also part of practical preparation. Although prophecy focuses on spiritual matters, the end times may bring material and social challenges. Wise management of resources, living prudently, and being aware of our needs and responsibilities allows us to face potential difficulties calmly and securely. Practical preparation is not about living in fear, but with responsibility and foresight, trusting that God will guide our decisions. Finally, maintaining active hope is fundamental. The 6,000-year prophecy reminds us that despite trials and challenges, God has a plan, and His justice will prevail. Living with hope enables us to act courageously, maintain faith, and inspire confidence in those around us, understanding that our practical and spiritual preparation serves a divine purpose. In conclusion, applying the prophecy to daily life involves strengthening our relationship with God, living ethically and consistently, developing discernment, participating in a spiritual community, managing resources, and maintaining hope. These practical steps allow us to be ready for the end times, face challenges with faith, and act as examples of obedience and vigilance in a world approaching a prophetically significant period. In conclusion, the prophecy of the 6,000 years invites us to stay attentive, strengthen our faith, and live with discernment regarding the end times. Recognizing the signs, preparing spiritually, and applying these principles in daily life allows us to face challenges with hope and confidence. If this video helped you better understand the prophecy and its relevance today, subscribe so you don't miss future analyses, like it to support this content, and comment on which sign or lesson impacted you the most. Your participation helps grow this community of faith and knowledge.